The building rose like a cold monument of glass and steel, reflecting a sky that looked far more confident than Daniel felt inside. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, as if whispering a warning he was too tired to hear. Daniel paused just outside the entrance. He adjusted the knot of his tie for the third time, though it was already tight enough to make breathing uncomfortable. The suit he wore was not his, it belonged to a neighbor who had insisted he take it for important occasions. The sleeves were slightly too long, the shoulders a little stiff, but Daniel was grateful. Gratitude had become second nature to him. He took one deep breath. This has to work, he told himself. It has to. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of polished floors and expensive cologne. Everything gleamed: marble tiles, chrome railings, smiling faces printed on motivational posters about success and innovation. Daniel felt like an intruder in a world that wasn't built for men like him. At the reception desk, a young woman looked up and smiled professionally. "Name, Daniel Carter," he said, his voice calm despite the storm inside his chest. "I have an interview at 10. She typed quickly, nodded, and handed him a visitor badge. "Top floor. Elevator to your right." Daniel thanked her and walked toward the elevator. Each step felt heavier than the last. His reflection in the mirrored walls followed him. Tired eyes, faint lines carved by years of worry, and a face that tried hard to look hopeful even when hope felt dangerous. As the elevator doors closed, Daniel's mind drifted backward, back to the morning that had started far too early. He had woken up before dawn, not because he needed to, but because sleep no longer came easily. The small apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. He lay still for a moment, listening, making sure everything was okay. Then he heard it, gentle breathing from the next room. He got up and peeked inside. His daughter, Lily, was curled up under her blanket, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Her hair fell across her face, and Daniel gently brushed it aside. "Daddy's got a big day today," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. "Wish me luck." He stood there longer than necessary, memorizing her peaceful face like he always did. In a world full of uncertainty, she was the only thing that made sense. Breakfast had been simple: toast, peanut butter, and a promise. "Are you going to get the job?" Lily had asked, swinging her legs from the chair. Daniel smiled, the practiced kind. "I'm going to try my best." "That's okay," she said cheerfully. "Even if you don't, I still love you." Those words, spoken so innocently, had stayed with him all the way to the interview. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the top floor. Daniel stepped out into a hallway so quiet it felt sacred. The carpet muffled his footsteps, and the walls were lined with framed awards and photographs of smiling executives shaking hands with powerful people. At the end of the hall was a glass door. "Interview room A." Daniel swallowed and knocked. "Come in." Inside, 3 people sat behind a long table. 2 men and 1 woman. All well dressed, all calm, all assessing him before he even spoke. "Good morning," Daniel said. "Thank you for having me." They nodded politely. One of the men gestured to the chair. "Please, have a seat." Daniel sat down carefully, resting his hands on his knees to keep them from shaking. He reminded himself to breathe. The questions began simply enough. "Tell us about your previous experience." Daniel answered honestly. He spoke about years of working in logistics, about night shifts and double shifts, about learning systems on the fly because there was no one else to do it. He spoke about reliability, about showing up even when it was hard. They nodded, took notes. "What was your reason for leaving your last position?" Daniel hesitated, just for a second. "My company downsized," he said. "Single parent. They needed someone who could work longer, unpredictable hours." "I understood." No bitterness, just truth. The woman leaned forward slightly. "How do you handle pressure?" Daniel thought of hospital bills, of unpaid rent, of Lily asking why he looked tired all the time. "I focus on responsibility," he said. "Pressure doesn't go away if you panic. Someone still depends on you." That earned another nod. But the atmosphere shifted when the questions turned technical. "What would you do if the system failed under peak demand?" Daniel answered, but his words felt slower now, less confident. The software they referenced was one he had only read about, never used directly. The man on the left frowned slightly. Have you worked with this platform before? No, Daniel admitted, but I learn quickly. I've adapted too. We need someone who can contribute immediately, the man interrupted gently. Daniel nodded again. He understood what was coming. Still, he kept answering. Kept trying, because giving up halfway had never been an option in his life. Finally, the last question came. Why do you want this job? The room was quiet. Daniel looked at them, not at their suits or their titles, but at their faces. For a moment, he considered giving the perfect corporate answer. Then he didn't. Because I'm a father, he said softly. And I want my daughter to grow up knowing that stability exists. I don't want her to learn fear before she learns dreams. The panel exchanged looks. The man in the center folded his hands. Thank you, Daniel. We appreciate your honesty. We'll let you know. Daniel felt it in his bones. That was it. He stood up, nodded once more, and offered a polite smile that cost him more energy than the interview itself. Thank you for your time. As he walked out, no one stopped him. The hallway felt longer on the way back. Each step echoed with unspoken words. Not good enough. Not this time. Maybe next. Inside the elevator, Daniel leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. The doors slid shut, and the ride down felt like a slow descent into reality. By the time he reached the lobby, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A notification from the school. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. Outside, the sun was brighter than it had any right to be. People hurried past him, laughing, talking, living lives that seemed untouched by the quiet despair settling into his chest. Daniel stopped at the top of the steps and looked back at the building one last time. He felt tired, not just physically, but in a way that reached deep into his soul. Tired of trying, tired of hoping, tired of explaining to a little girl why things never worked out. I did my best, he murmured. And then he walked away. He didn't know that from the top floor, through a wall of glass, someone was still watching him. Someone who saw more than a failed interview. Someone who saw a man carrying the weight of the world, and still standing. Chapter 2. The interview room was quiet again. Not the awkward silence of a failed conversation, but the reflective kind, the kind that lingers after something important has passed unnoticed. For several seconds after Daniel left, no one spoke. The woman on the panel closed her folder slowly. One of the men leaned back in his chair, already moving on in his mind to the next candidate. To them, it was routine. Another interview, another decision, another life briefly intersecting with theirs before disappearing forever. But at the far end of the table, the man who hadn't spoken much remained still. Elliot Grayson, founder, CEO, Billionaire. His eyes were fixed on the glass wall through which Daniel had walked moments ago. Interesting candidate, the woman finally said. Good attitude, but lacking the technical depth we need. Yes, the man beside her agreed. Not quite the right fit. Elliot didn't respond. Instead, he replayed the interview in his mind. Not the answers, not the resume, but the pauses. The restraint. The way Daniel had accepted interruption without resentment. The way he had stood up straight even when rejection was obvious. Most candidates argued, some begged, others masked arrogance with confidence. Daniel had done none of that. He didn't sell himself, Elliot said quietly. The others looked at him. That's usually a weakness, the man replied. Elliot shook his head. No, sometimes it's a sign of someone who's been selling himself his entire life, and is tired. He stood up. The chair slid backward sharply, startling the others. I want to see his file again. The woman frowned slightly. Elliot, with respect, we need someone operationally ready. The team. I know what the team needs, Elliot interrupted, not unkindly but firmly. But I also know what companies fail from. Silence. They fail from hiring skill without character, he continued. They fail when pressure reveals who people really are. He walked toward the glass wall. Did you see his hands? Elliot asked. The others exchanged looks. They were shaking, he said. Not from fear of us. From fear of going home with nothing. He paused. I've seen that before. Elliot Grayson wasn't born into wealth. Long before the skyscrapers, the private jets, and the boardrooms, he had been a boy sitting in the back of a run-down grocery store, watching his mother count coins under flickering lights. His father had left early, left behind promises, debts, and silence. His mother had worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. And every night, she came home exhausted, but she never complained. One evening, when Elliot was 12, he asked her why she kept smiling when life was clearly unfair. She had knelt in front of him and said, "Because if I break, you'll think breaking is normal." That sentence had shaped his entire life. Now, decades later, he had seen the same quiet strength in Daniel. Elliot checked his watch. "Where is he now?" he asked. "Probably already gone," the woman said. "Security logged him out." Elliot didn't hesitate. "Then I'm going after him." "What?" one of the men said, half laughing. "Elliot, interviews end all the time." "You can't." Elliot was already grabbing his coat. "I can," he said. "And I am." Outside, Daniel walked without direction. He didn't call anyone. There was no one to call. He passed cafes filled with people working on laptops, laughing softly, planning futures that felt unreachable. He passed a toy store window and slowed unconsciously, his eyes landing on a small stuffed rabbit that looked eerily similar to Lily's. Maybe next time, he thought. He checked his phone at last. A missed call from the school. His chest tightened. He stopped on the sidewalk, head bowed, as if bracing himself for another blow. He considered turning back, going inside the building, asking for feedback, asking for anything. But he didn't. He had promised himself long ago that Lily would never see him beg. Just as he took another step forward, a voice cut through the city noise. "Daniel." He turned, confused. A man in an expensive coat was jogging toward him, clearly out of breath. His tie was loosened, his expression urgent. Daniel frowned. "Yes, I'm Elliot Grayson," the man said, extending his hand quickly. "I'm the CEO." Daniel blinked. "The CEO?" he repeated. "Yes," Elliot said. "And before you say anything, please don't walk away." Daniel hesitated, then shook his hand. His grip was firm but cautious, like someone used to disappointment. "Did I forget something?" Daniel asked. Elliot smiled faintly. "No, we did." He gestured toward a nearby bench. "May I sit?" Daniel nodded slowly. They sat side by side, 2 men from completely different worlds, connected by a single unfinished conversation. "You didn't fail the interview," Elliot said. Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. "With respect, sir, I think I did." "You failed our checklist," Elliot replied. "That's not the same thing." Daniel said nothing. Elliot continued, "I've interviewed thousands of people. Most want success. Some want money. A few want power." He looked at Daniel. "You wanted responsibility." Daniel swallowed. "My daughter," he said quietly. "She's all I have." "I know," Elliot said. "You mentioned her." Daniel's shoulders stiffened slightly. "If this is about sympathy." "It's not," Elliot said firmly. "It's about trust." Daniel looked at him, really looked at him now. "You walked away without bitterness," Elliot continued. "That tells me more than any certification." Daniel shook his head. "I don't have the skills you need." "I heard it." Elliot nodded. "You don't, yet." He paused. "But skills can be taught. Integrity can't. Endurance can't. And you have both." Daniel felt something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. "Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope." "What are you saying?" he asked. Elliot smiled, not the polished corporate smile, but a genuine one. "I'm offering you a position." Daniel stared at him. "Not the one you applied for," Elliot added. "A different role. One with training, mentorship, growth." Daniel's voice trembled. "Why?" Elliot answered honestly. "Because one day, this company will face a crisis. And when it does, I don't want someone who panics or protects themselves. I want someone who knows how to carry weight, and keep moving." Daniel looked down at his hands. For the first time, they weren't shaking. "I don't want special treatment," Daniel said. "You're not getting it," Elliot replied. "You're getting opportunity." Silence settled between them. Then Daniel spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I start when? Elliot grinned. Tomorrow morning. Daniel exhaled, a long, shaky breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding for years. There's one more thing, Elliot added. Daniel looked up. Bring your daughter to the office someday, Elliot said softly. I'd like to meet the reason you didn't quit. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He stood up abruptly, unsure what to do with the emotion flooding him. Thank you, he said. I won't waste this. Elliot stood as well. I know you won't. That night, Daniel opened the apartment door quietly. Lily looked up from the couch. Daddy, you're late. He crossed the room in 2 steps and knelt in front of her, pulling her into a hug so tight she laughed. Did you get the job? She asked. Daniel smiled. This time, it wasn't forced. No, he said. Her face fell. But, he continued, I got something better. Her eyes lit up. Really? Yes, he whispered. I got a chance. She hugged him again, and for the first time in a long time, Daniel believed. Not that life would be easy, but that it might finally be fair.